Hermann Hesse once said, "Love your suffering. Do not resist it. Do not flee from it. It is only your aversion to it that hurts, nothing else." My take on this goes as follows. To transcend suffering, one has to practice unconditional acceptance. Only then can one see through it. To experience peace, bliss, and joy, one has to be able to pierce through the mirage portrayed by the mind. One can only see the light when clouds of thoughts are clear. To love your suffering means to be able to perceive the mental projections surrounding it as it is unconditionally. Acceptance and awareness brings clarity in distinguishing between fact and the elusive story-making process the mind projects. See, only the insecurity-ridden mind magnifies and reacts to past pains and hurts. Mental resistance to one's suffering only strengthens the identification one holds to it, and this goes on spilling onto one's understanding and approach to life. To face one's suffering means to observe it, without being influenced or disturbed by it. It is possible to be free. Attention around one's internal dialogue is essential. The more one can perceive oneself as one is, the more clarity one will experience in moment-to-moment living. To remain conscious is arduous for the unconscious nature of the mind, but this is where it all begins. Freedom is possible only when one is unconditionally attentive of oneself. Be aware, be conscious. Ouspensky once said, "When one realizes one is asleep at that moment, one is already half awake." My take on this goes as follows. Understanding flowers with awareness and attention of oneself. Identification to thoughts made up from words, images, and fragmented memories is the primary reason one remains asleep and bound to the dreamlike state of the mind. Waking up from the dream surrounding the notion of oneself requires distance and space to observe thoughts as they are, to observe oneself as one is. See, the mirage the mind portrays seems natural because it's repeated so often that one unconsciously adopts it as something true. One's unquestioned belief systems and cultural conditioning go on guiding and influencing one's approach to living. One cannot experience freedom if one is bound by conditions. Awareness breaks this prison-like state one is bound by. Understanding what thoughts one gives significance to in day-to-day living will shed light on what causes one to suffer. The insecurity-ridden mind will always depend on external gratification to feel good or use temporary forms of pleasure to distract oneself from the mental build-up one is failing to face. The illusion that one controls one's thoughts is also a trick the mind plays to keep one in the loop, which is false. Until one cannot see that thought is the primary influencer of one's living experience, one will remain bound by it. Being consciously aware of thoughts as they go by without any form of involvement will break this chain of identification. Freedom is possible only when Osho once said, "Whatever you do, do with deep alertness. Then even small things become sacred." My take on this goes as follows. To be in flow, to be attentive, means to be present. And in this state of awareness, one can experience living totally without the split created by the insecurity-ridden mind. When attention is away from the present, one is lost in thought, and thought is bound to projections imposed by the identification to fragmented memories of the past. Attention to what is present changes one's quality and approach to living. When one can be attentive, the past automatically loosens its grip of influence it has on one's approach to living. When there is attention, all the senses are heightened, and only then the experience becomes whole. In this awareness, one comes to a state of no mind, and that is where real understanding of self sprouts beyond the misinterpreted images one holds oneself to be. The more aware one becomes of one's breath in moment-to-moment activity, the better the quality of awareness will be. A wholesome experience is far more rewarding than one split up by judgment and comparison. The overwhelming nature of the mind has no power over the present moment. Be aware, be conscious.